Chapter 18 covers nations, crusades, and Mongols. The time period covered throughout this chapter is around 900 AD to 1200 AD, but a lot of the focus of the turning point of many creative endeavors occurs around the year of 1000 AD. It is important to note that regions covered throughout this chapter are in Europe and detail the cultural transformation and societal selections of various kings and political systems throughout France, Germany, England, and Italy. These details comprise the uprising of the nations. The development of crusades began during the 11th century from the growing influence of the popes. A holy crusade to free Holy Land of Jerusalem from Muslim control was a turning point in history. The other topic covered throughout this chapter were the Mongols, who were known as vicious and devastating military forces that established the world's largest land empire, but had limited lasting impact on Europe as a whole. These troops conquered all of Central Asia and later successfully invaded China. There were many inventions that arose during this time period. Many of these inventions enabled humans to manipulate nature through technological advancements. One thing that is important to note is that as the weather warmed and the political situation stabilized throughout Europe, creativity seemed to surge, and many of these inventions were created. The first is the heavy plow. The heavy plow was unlike previous plows because it had a sharp point of iron to cut the soil. It allowed the soil to be aerated, which increased the quality and growing capacity for agriculture at the time. The next is the horse collar. The initial design of the horse collar caused stress on the horse's windpipe. The new horse collar put the load on the horse's shoulders and allowed the horse to pull heavier loads, such as the heavy plow. This invention increased production because a horse became more practical than an oxen for labor. Their functionality as an animal increased. The next is the three-crop rotation system. This made the field become divided into three sections instead of the previous two. Two sections were dedicated to grain and the other one was dedicated to the alternate crop. This increased the acreage of grain production from 50 to 67%, and the food supply skyrocketed. The next is water wheels and windmills. These provided power to turn mills and make grinding easier. They provided power for manufacturing needs, which saved time and money in regard to manual and animal labor. In turn, manufacturing became important for making textiles, barrels, wagons, and metal projects. The next is guilds. These were initially formed so that merchants could band together for safety when traveling to markets, and later so artisans could regulate quality and price for goods. They introduced production regulations. For example, they helped to mandate quality standards and manufacturing standards. If I were to develop a short slogan that captures the time period's essence, the slogan for this period would be, "The rise of the nations brings forth the rise of power, invention, and creativity. We must adapt." Because, as we can see throughout the chapter, the development of technology of the time allowed for small towns and cities with castles and divisions of labor to be developed. These in turn created cultures that existed as units and functioned with governments, regulations, and power systems. The rise of nations centralized and stabilized governments and offered the masses a sense of protection. These power systems created a sense of dominance across various cultures. And these cultures turned into the levels of dominance and cultivated crusade and Mongol efforts and hopes for more power. These efforts generated tactical creativity in crusade tactics and invasion tactics. As we can see, the rise of power leads to the need for more innovation and more creativity in order to be successful as a nation that strives to be more powerful within the world. One of the barriers discussed in the chapter had to do with guilds. Although the implementation of guilds within a society at the time had a lot of benefits, they eventually evolved into regulating too many restrictive practices that in turn dampened creativity, and the need for a dynamic marketplace forced innovation on the manufacturing community. These barriers could have been overcome during this time by simply not allowing that much control over the market. Yet at the time of the rising of nations, it would have been hard to implement less control and more freedom for artisans and creators. In my opinion, there are creative barriers when one company or organization for a product or service controls the entire market. The monopoly type system lacks diversity. That is why, in my opinion, The Hanseatic League, which controlled essentially all of both land and trade shipping within the Baltic Sea, hindered the creativity due to the ability to develop control over the trade market. The dominance of this league created a barrier for creativity because those who wanted to trade had no other route to go. In other words, they were stuck. Our creativity is heightened through options. Although this example may be a stretch, I do believe the total control in a specific domain creates a barrier for creative potential in others. When describing 3 lessons that I was able to draw about creativity from this time period that can help us enhance our own creativity, they were as follows. The first is technology is cumulative. We see throughout this time period that technology is generated through human reactions to culture. When there is a need, something must be created to alleviate that need, or make dealing with that need more effective and efficient. The second is diversity and increased mercantilism of towns and cities lead to other creative developments. We see the same thing occurring in many cities where innovation and creativity are encouraged. Take the startups that launch in San Fran, New York, or Austin. They are enabled and encouraged by a community of creative people, which produces creative developments, creative businesses, and creative ideas. When we reside in a town or city that encourages creativity and diversity, that town or city will in turn be more creative and diverse as a whole. The last is laws provide stability and trade provides opportunity. As much as we may disagree with some of the laws of the land in which we reside, it is important to take away from this period that the notion that nations feel more secure when they have a sense of belonging from an identification with a king or president, a set of laws that they can abide by, and greater trade which provides opportunity and improvement in our daily lives. And that's my presentation on Chapter 18. Thanks for listening.